that there are lots of people who can't be here today but who are interested, and one of the things that we could do is pick out a snippet of this and maybe put it up on the website for people to show them how it is. So, Deb, you want to talk a little bit about why you investigated getting this resource for us, and I'll navigate to it.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Accessibility is a big deal for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is federal law. There are two federal laws that apply to accessibility. One is the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the other one is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. These two laws largely dictate to us what it is our responsibilities are. So, in essence, they've defined what a disability is, and that basically a disability is a physical or mental impairment that significantly impacts a major life function. It's fairly broad. These are both fairly broad definitions, and they are both basically considered to be civil rights laws, so that basically their purpose is to make sure that individuals with disabilities are not excluded solely on the basis of their disability. So, like I said, they've defined what a disability is, and they've also kind of defined what a major life activity is. A major life activity is just about anything. Again, it's fairly broad. It's sitting, standing, running, all of those things, but also reading, thinking, communicating, concentrating. So you can see how particularly some of those things are impacted by the college environment. The two entities that tend to decide discrimination cases, the Office of Civil Rights and the Department of Justice, have really further in the process of all of the discrimination cases that people with disabilities have brought. The laws have been further and further and further defined. And so what we know about what to do at the college level, college and university level, is that from the DOJ and the OCR, we know that campuses must be fully accessible, that students should not have to wait for services and they should not have to ask for services. And so that these two laws apply to everything that the college offers, all programs, all activities, all services. And it is not just the purview of the Access Services Coordinator or the Disability Services Coordinator to make sure that these things happen, that these laws pertain to all faculty and all staff. So anything that you put out on a website, any content, anything that you do has to be accessible. In addition, any professors, all of their course content and all their course materials must be accessible. So this includes, for faculty, this includes their web pages, this includes wikis, links, blogs. Many professors here use Moodle. I know some professors use other learning management systems like Serendip. Anything has to be accessible, all course content and materials. So the guiding question that the Department of Justice and OCR always come back to ask is, do students with disabilities have the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as students without disabilities? So, having said all that, how are we doing at Bryn Mawr? Well, in some ways, we're doing very well. And in other ways, it's a little bit more problematic. And one of the areas that's problematic in particular is Moodle. And one of the reasons for that is we have a lot of students on campus with print disabilities. And by that I mean it can be anything from a student, currently have a student on campus who is blind, for example. We also have students on campus who have sensory sensitivities, which means that for them, they need a certain size font, they need a certain color of background, they need a certain type of font, and they need wider margins on a page, and they need more spacing between lines. we also have a fairly high number of students on campus with medical challenges, which makes it difficult for them to read for extended periods of time. And so you can see again how those kinds of situations are all going to create some havoc when you're trying to take courses and with the amount of reading and research that's required. So many of these students, not all of them, but many of them use screen reading software or text-to-speech software in order to access all of this information. But in order for it to work, things have to be scanned and uploaded in a very particular way. And that's something that Jenny's going to talk a little bit more about, I think. But one of the things that we've come across is a company called Census Access. It's actually a Denmark company, and they actually work with something called RoboBraille, but they've also pioneered this, what we're referring to for our purposes on campus is a document converter. And what this will do is it will take most, and it's like Jen's showing you, the Access, all this was just added to the Access Services website as of Thursday last week, so it's still fairly new.
Cutting edge.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you go to the Access Services, Jen just clicked on this, and it gives you a little bit of information, but in essence, you can take almost any kind of a document, upload it, and it will be converted to a format. And all you need really, it's free, it's fairly fast, and it's something that anyone with a bryn-mawr.edu address can use for free. And you can send to somebody with a bryn-mawr.edu address for free. So in other words, a professor, if they had a handout last minute and they needed to send it to, for instance, our student who is blind and prefers Braille and or needs a Word document to access some of her technology, they could simply scan that document, upload it through this document converter, send it to the student, and it would come out in the format that they indicate. Like I said, for many of our students with print disabilities, they prefer an audio format, and this will do that as well. So you can take these documents and you can upload them, and they will come out as an audio and can be read to the student. So this is a little conversion chart, and it kind of tells you the original formats down the side, and then what it can be converted to. So it's pretty broad and covers a fair amount, not everything.
Note that it also includes images of documents, not just documents themselves, text documents. So what this means is it can OCR scan, and what we'll talk about is how to make it more successful at OCR scanning.
Does that mean a website cannot be converted to Word, which would be needed by your student?
So you can convert a website to an audio file, a digital Braille file, or it looks like a text file. I'm guessing not a Word file because it would have to add in all the special doc stuff.
So can it still be used for your students, though? Websites?
Well, some of the students, not all of the
Some
students.
of the students you're talking about, yeah.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
But you could probably take that text file and convert it to a doc file just by saving it out.
So then, do you want to? Okay, go ahead.
So we thought we'd do a trial. I'm doing a quick plug for our academic technology LibGuide. And I know there's a text file. Let's see. Who's coming up? Here's a deck. Hi, come in. Grab a sandwich, please. Please. We have extras. So. All right, so here's a PDF file. This is a PDF file that was made from a doc. So in other words, someone wrote this up in Word and saved it out as a PDF file. When that happens, Adobe goes on ahead and takes the text So you see I can highlight this. It's actually text. Unlike a scan, when you scan something, right, you're taking a photograph of the text. Here it's you're saving a PDF out from something else, it's actually a text file. So let me save this to my hard drive. Or is it this way? There we go. So now I'm going to go to the document converter, and it asks me, so I'm taking a file that I've saved to my hard drive. I could actually click here, and I could type in a URL. So I could have actually given it the URL of that file, or I guess this is most useful if you're trying to convert a website into something that's accessible. I could also click here and just paste text in, so I can cut and paste text directly into this. We suspect people are mostly going to be doing the file bit. So I browse for my file. It should be in downloads, air server guide, open, upload. Okay, successfully been uploaded. It gives me a little message here telling me that. Now I select which format I want.
Click the MP3. Can I do that?
Yeah. Do MP3. Okay, my document's in English. Let's just put it on normal speed. And then I just type in my email address. And
Or you could type in the email address of the student that you're sending it to. So.
If you work with faculty and the faculty are working with a student, or you're working with a student who's a Haverford student, we would need to email it to someone with a Bryn Mawr address and then forward it to that student, because this is only going to be count for people on Bryn Mawr. So here's the record. Let's pull up my email.
Question. How many language options are there?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
How many language options do you remember?
Well, I don't think we opted for the language option. We toyed around with that and decided that the primary language is English, and so we just it is a feature of Census Access that you could convert other languages, and we toyed with that, but the decision was to keep it in English. But
So if you
it will do
had
other languages.
So if you had a reading for a French class
Mm-hmm.
and you uploaded it, it won't be able to make an audio
No.
file. Okay.
But you might be able to OCR it in Adobe Acrobat. It will let you do French language as the major language. It gets tricky if there are more than one languages in the document.
Right.
That's painful.
And it's like a text with a scan.
Right. If someone's quoting in French, it gets painful. Okay.
Jenny, what if hypothetically you were doing a URL, but it happened to be a URL to a site that required authentication?
I think that won't work.
Okay.
So I think
So it has to be a public web page.
I'm thinking so. If it requires you to put in a password or anything, the converter can't do that. Obviously, so we can try it though. Let's go to Google. Log in. So one thing that to mention about the disability and the access services or the requirement to produce accessible materials, we're thinking about it primarily with respect to students, but it's actually anyone on campus.
Yeah,
So
it is. Even alum can use it. Yeah.
alums, and technically when we're producing materials for those groups, those should be accessible as well. So if you were, and I do want to run my services this here, but I mean to point this out to them, right? They might want to make sure their materials. Okay, so this is, I'm getting the link from my Bryn Mawr, from one of my Google classes. I'm going to log out. Let's see what happens if I try to.
And for alums, Jenny, that would be a case where they have to be forwarded in since they don't have a BrynMawr.edu email address any longer.
No, because alums have forwarding set up. So you can email an alum using her Bryn Mawr email, and it'll get to whatever email address they're actually using.
Oh, and there's no termination date for that? That's
Forwarding for life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it won't go beyond a firewall. So it would have to be a public access
Yep.
website. But for example, I could have put in, rather than downloading this, I'm guessing, I haven't tried this yet, that I could put in just the link to this PDF. And all it's doing there is it's going to that
You have
site.
two HTTPs.
Thank you. Yeah, so it went to the place where that PDF was stored and just sucked it up for me. It would be the same thing. Okay, I can get back to my little mail.
There it is.
Move over it.
And so you just click on the link.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it gives me a source file. It gives me a link to a web page with a link to the audio file, and then I can download it. So, source document, there we go. Right click on the link. Save link.
And Jenny, had you selected the Braille option, would that basically prepare it for when the Braille, a standard Braille reader?
Yes.
Okay.
You have to. We don't have an embosser on campus, so it's
Yeah.
not. There's nothing to Braille. But our student who is on campus.
Bryn Mawr College, January 2014. Information Services Air Server is a third-party software solution.
So,
Let's hear them say Mar again.
they did pretty well, actually.
So she prefers Word documents. I mean, if she can't get them brailled, and we don't braille everything for
Yeah.
her, but well, you know this because you were involved in many of the meetings last spring. But yeah, Word documents work for her.
Okay.
Would go right to her Braille note.
Yep.
So, one thing I like about this is the students can use it, so it empowers students to, even if it's not a document provided in the context of class, or if they see something up on our LibGuide, they can put it through even if we haven't made it accessible. It makes it a lot easier for us to make things accessible. And, accessibility is an interesting thing because when I talk about helping faculty make their documents more accessible, what I'm talking about is making them readable by a variety of things, right? But that's not necessarily putting it into the format that those things would read. So this is a step sort of beyond that, right, that this can do. So are there any questions about how it works, who can use it, aside from those that have already been asked?
Are we doing any, I know that Haverford does have an embosser. Is there any situation where we would work with Haverford to create something?
It's
Or
a
not
possibility, but embossers are pretty fragile. They're fragile in the sense that they take a pounding. And in order to put something through an embosser, you basically have to know how to read Braille to see if it went through correctly. And that's an unusual skill. So So, and we're fortunate in the sense that our student who's on campus either prefers Braille,
Yeah.
but which we will send out to be Braille, or she prefers a Word document that goes right to her Braille note, and then it Brailles things for her, and she just reads it
Yeah.
as though it was an email. So we're lucky. Their student happens to be totally different in terms of his preferences and what he's comfortable with, and also he's in a totally different study program. He's a physics major, so they've got many more issues in terms of converting physics stuff so far than what we have so far. So it's huge difference to the point where I know they've had to consult with a retired physics professor who has flown to their campus once a month to meet with their physics department about how to make things accessible, because it's very, very complicated for a student in that kind of a program.
Foreign languages are tricky. Not so much foreign languages like alt text is in one language, necessarily. I think some languages are better served than others, like Spanish.
But what about things in Arabic? Things that are
Yes-ish. The issue, and I don't know whether this would do that. I suspect this would do pretty well with Latin-based languages, but a tricky thing is mathematical formulae and chemical formulae, right? Anything with lots of tables is tricky. Things with lots of footnotes can be tricky, in part because there's no, from what I can tell, consensus around how to handle the footnotes. Do you put the footnotes in where they occur? Do you put them at the end? You know, if you're listening to it, that might be less, that might be more disruptive, but if you're reading it in Braille, it actually might be better to have the footnote there, so there's not sort of a universal thing around that.
Do links ever expire in the email? Like these days is
I would guess that they do, because one of the things that these guys talked about, I know, from a accessibility and a copyright issue, is that the stuff doesn't stay up on their server forever, right? There's a
Yeah, they
finite.
only keep it for like 7 days, and they keep it just to make sure that it went through. They don't, and what they keep track of. In fact, somewhere in there, I think if you go into the facts, Jenny, there's a question about what happens to the material I'm converting. They keep track of some of the what do I want to call? What are they called? Yeah, they keep some of the information about the sizes of the documents and the types. They keep that for their internal purposes, but the actual documents itself, they keep for 7 days and then they delete.
And are they downloadable? Or
What do you?
like, can you store the file locally, or is it only
Yes.
available? Okay.
Yes. You can download it to your computer. And
Oh, right. Yes. You mean the document that you get back from the converter? Yes, you can say that.
And I don't think it has digital rights stuff attached to it. I think it's, there's something called digital rights management, things that they add to files so that you can't copy them from one place to another. I don't think it has any of that. That might have been in the original. So that's helpful too. Because those can often flummox readers and things like that.
I don't see how they could, just from a legal standpoint, because they're not claiming ownership of that converted
Correct.
source.
Correct. And this is used, I think Stanford.
Yes. A lot of universities across the country. Stanford uses it, Berkeley uses it, University of Boston uses it. I mean, those are just 3 that I know about because I consulted with them before we started it. So, I know there's others, but.
So the second type of this talk, or the second part of this talk, is going to be me telling you guys some things to keep in mind when you're making documents and some things to talk to other people about in making documents so that you're more likely to be successful when you upload them.
Yeah, because this is only as good as the scan that gets put into it in the
Or the
first place.
document, or
Yeah.
the whatever.
Actually, one more question
Sure,
about
please.
are there any rights restrictions on distributing like the link or the file of converted documents? Because I imagine a lot of
with Sam, I think.
Yeah, there's a copyright statement on here that if
Yeah.
the material is copyrighted, you shouldn't be uploading it. If the material, is obscene or unlawful or any of that kind of stuff, you shouldn't upload stuff that's of personal nature. But I did work with Sam on, there's 2 places on here where there's a copyright statement as well as what you shouldn't upload statement.
But I think the idea is if you're using it for personal scholarly use, that falls under
Fair use.
fair use. If I take it and then sell it to you, right, I have violated fair use. So I think that's sort of where the legal protection comes in. I don't think there's anything though physically embedded in the document at all that would allow you. It's just the same legal right as between selling legal copies of. So a lot of what I'm going to say, in fact, maybe all of what I'm going to say are on these little things that we cribbed from other sites that had this
Stanford.
up. Stanford was very generous in a lot of use their materials. So essentially, and let me pull up a Word doc, because I think it would help. Word might not be the best thing here. Actually, even better. Just pull up the Word doc. Page source. Alright, instant Word file, HTML file. So what I'm showing you is the code for this page. Okay? There. And the reason I'm showing you this is because when you look at HTML, it's easy to see HTML file. When you're making something like a Word doc, the same kind of thing is going on in the background that you never see. Okay, so I think it helps to understand. Basically, you see here at the very top, there's this HTML, and within brackets, and there's numbers. This is telling you that this file is in HTML, and everything after this, at the very bottom of this document, there's going to be a closed HTML bracket. Similarly, the top of this document, there's a head, and then there's a closed head, and then there's a body, and there's a closed body. Okay. Essentially, when you're creating a document, either in HTML, in Word, in a PDF, it is tagging certain parts of the document as certain things. So when you type in text, you can see here, this is then tagged as a link, right? I think this is an image. There's an icon. Whoops. Go back. Sorry. A little further down, we'll see some text. So here's a bunch of links, current students. Here's the link that it goes to. The text is here in between these 2 brackets. The link is defined before it. So essentially when, and if we go to the page, there'll be a bunch of links. That's this stuff up at the top. This current students, faculty, right? Each of these is an instance where someone has said, that text right there, I want it to go to this place. Okay, and there's a tag in the thing that tags that text so that when someone clicks on it, the computer knows where it goes. Similarly, this has been tagged as a head 1. This has been tagged as a head 2. I'll show you where that happens. A little further down. Find it. What was it? Access services? Was the head 1? Best practices was ahead. Sorry. Best practices. There we go. So that's been tagged as the title. Sorry. And then below it. Oh no, wait, that's tagged as the title, and that's probably also tagged as, yes. This is the sidebar where the link is. And then here we go, head 2. So that's a head 2. The one below it is actually tagged as a head 3. Okay. And then you see these guys, this P means this is tagged as a paragraph, so that's treated as a paragraph. This line tells you these little LIs, these are all the bullet points. So this tells you start bullet points, each one of these is a bullet point, end bullet points. And you can see that here. Okay. So when you're doing text in Word, it's doing the same thing. Okay. If, so let's just text some, sorry, Demi. Text in here. Doesn't like my spelling. If you use built-in styles. So I could make this, I could go up here and I could put in an indent, I could add in a bullet, I don't happen to know the thing for the bullet, let's just put an asterisk in. I used to know it automatically converts it. When if I go up here and use the bullet and say I want this to be a bullet, it puts that tag in that this is a list and treats it like a list. Similarly, if I were to undo this and say I want this to be heading 1, it puts it in as heading 1. If I had another heading below that, I could say it's heading 2. Okay. And then this is normal, which is its normal sort of paragraph mode. What you don't want to do is, let's say these are both normal. Now let's say I want all my headings to be, 18-point font, bold, right? I could go through and put each of these things in myself, both on the website and in the word processing and in PowerPoints and everything. People have tried to get away from that because that means if you're dealing with long documents and you want to change how all of your headings look, or you want them to all be consistent, right? You've got to go and change them in multiple places. So there's this idea in most software now that there's something called a style sheet, and right here this is sort of the style sheet that comes out of the box with Word, right? And you use the style sheets, you say this is a heading 1, and then somewhere else, and it happens to be here, if I can click these and modify. Here's where I say what I want my heading 1 to look like. So I want this to be 18-point, I don't want it to be blue, I want it to be black. I want it to be bold, I want to choose which font it is, that kind of thing. That all gets set in the style sheet, and then what you do is set the fonts. Set the styles for each piece of text that you're dealing with. Okay? This is very important because when you're converting a Word doc to an HTML file, for example, it takes the things you've keyed in as head 1 here and makes them head 1s in the Word doc. Okay? So if you're, and in a screen readers and things like this, they will often, like for example, the ones that are text-to-speech, they give more pause after a head 1 than they do at the end of an original sentence, right? Or some of them will say heading 1, heading 2, to kind of help someone follow their way through the document. Does that make sense? So these sorts of things help a lot, I think, when you're going from, say, web to Word or Word to web or PowerPoint to Word or things like that. The conversion will happen better. But the way that they deal with screen readers also, it will be a lot better. Similarly, let's say I had a table. Okay. So I could put in my table in a couple of ways. Right now I'm just adding tabs. Oops. Sorry. And I'm actually terrible about this because I learned when I did graphic design, the conversion between Word and the graphic design programs was terrible. So we had to not use style for certain things. which now we want to get away from that. So I could, if I wanted to, show my ruler. Show my ruler, and I could create my table this way. And let's say I wanted this to be the head of my table. Okay, do that. So I could do it that way, or I could make the table using words insert table. Where is it? There. It just so happens insert table also has a convert text table, which I'm going to use real quick. And tell them it has 4 columns, 2 rows. It's automatically deciding that. And I can do things like tell it that the head of my, so I have a header row here. Okay, it automatically knows this. What happens is tables are some of the hardest things to deal with if you're talking about, particularly if you're in a no vision situation, right? Because you have to keep track of everything. And the way that they handle it is they'll say, this is a header row, they'll give everything an ID, and then this, when it comes to the particular cells in the table, it will read what the 2 ID points are, right? So it'll say, this is, let's say this was name of school, and then my, this was, I don't know, number of students or something. So when I got in here, it would say name of school, Bryn Mawr College, and the next row down, it's a name of school, Haverford College. And when I got over to the next thing, it would say total student population, 3,000, right? So that you can actually read this when you're listening to it. So for reasons like that, it's really, really important when you're using Word files, PowerPoints, to go ahead and use the built-in styles. If you don't like the way they look, change the way the styles look. Don't stop using them and just do your own converting, right? Because that way, when it goes through the converter, it will convert better. Similarly, when you convert this, if I were to save this out as a PDF, it doesn't come pre-installed. At least I don't think it does. It didn't last year, I know. You don't have it. You go to Programs. On the Mac, you go to Applications folder. And then down here somewhere will be Microsoft System Center, Software Center. On the Mac, you'll just see Software Center. If you go here, one of the things that you can download on your own without help. Well, you can download on your own. You have permission to download. Whether you can do it without help, that remains to be seen. Sometimes it gets a little funky. So, but anyway, one of the things that you have that you're able to download is Adobe Acrobat. And definitely you want the latest version because the older versions don't have the same accessibility functions. So we're at version 11. If you haven't used Acrobat in a long time. Have people used Acrobat? I think, yeah. I know a lot of faculty don't know about it and don't know how to use it. But it is actually really powerful. It can let you combine PDFs into one document, split them up into multiple documents, delete things, right? So there it is, Acrobat, available. Okay, so one of the things that you'll see, this probably came over as a tagged PDF, as something that already has tags in it that let us, oh wait, that's Reader, oops, sorry. I want it to open with like the licensing of my product. See if that gets better.
In theory, though, if we convert via Word to a PDF, we will get a tagged
In theory.
file.
Yes.
What if, basically, you convert to PDF using the PDF printer option? At that point, is that still tagged, or is that really just going to be an image file?
It should be a tag file.
It is, okay, so
It should
that
be,
is a
yeah.
tagged file, okay.
Okay, I don't know if it's gonna let me do this, but under tools, there's this action wizard and there's this handy make accessible action. And so you can just tell it to make accessible. So if there are any things, for example, one of the things you don't regularly do probably when you're creating a Word file is add in alternate text for your images. So the other thing that people do, if you have tables, if you have charts, if you have images that add any sort of content to the file, there's something called alt text, and it's in HTML, it's in Word, it's in all these things that you basically supply what would be read in the place of this image. And from what I have read, in the field, you know, decorative images, a logo, that's less important than things that actually you wouldn't be able to get that information without looking at the document. Similarly, if there are pictures that have captions and the caption is readable, then often the caption is fine. It depends on how informative it is.
Jenny, can you say something about fillable forms?
Yes. So one of the steps in the make accessible thing is this a fillable form? And if it is, it will go through and try to find the tagging for that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it wasn't tagged as a form, right? If you created it in Word and it was a Word fillable form,
Yeah.
it should be able to pick up on the tagging. I don't know if it will come over correctly. Similarly, you can add form files in Acrobat. And
Right, if
it
it's
should pick up
created like
those.
in Create
Right.
or whatever the Acrobat
Correct.
writer is,
Correct.
then it should be tagged.
It should be tagged, yeah. But I think it can go through and you can fix that too. The other thing to think about, though, is a lot of, I think, where we run into the most problems are scans that people have put up that are the typical scan for this is why I wish I had my computer, because I have one that do scans. A typical scan for a class, right? And it's a scan of a book. It's 2 pages. It's 2 to a page, right? Because you put it down. There's usually, you squished it down on this photocopier, so there's like, yeah, there's shadow and there's warping, right? One of the things that Acrobat Pro can do and that our Census Access can do, if you put that kind of PDF up, because you've scanned it on our scanner in the office, you've saved it as a PDF, you put it up, it will go through an OCR of the text. But it can easily be fooled if the text is wonky, if it's slightly askew, if things are
Underlined or scribbled.
underlined, or if you smashed it down so there's a really heavy, like the text is kind of like this, and everything. We have a scanner in Carpenter. And I always just do this. Whoops, no.
It's on there under the facts, which
Oh,
the stuff that you.
that's right. Where can I go to scan something? So we have this wonderfully named Zeuchel Zeta scanner that was designed for digitizing books. And it's in the Visual Resources Center in Carpenter. It's free for faculty and staff to use during normal business hours. Dell is actually there, can help you. Usually there's if Dell's not around, there's another staff member you might. There are a lot of students that apparently use it, so you can maybe tap one of them. One quirky thing about it is it's not plugged into our network, so you do have to bring in a USB stick. So it's not like the scanners in our offices where you just squish it down and you're good to go. But it has a book cradle. It has glare reduction lighting, right? It's designed so that when you put a book in, it scans this page and then this page. So you get single one-up pages. So the most important thing when you're scanning to make this successful is scan 1 page at a time. Okay, don't do the 2 thing, even though it's less scanning technically. And then the other thing is to try and make it so that the page is not distorted. Okay, and and it has things in place that it tries to do that. When they're scanning, like when we send something out to be brailled or something like that, they actually take the spine off the book and feed the things in, and that gives you the best OCR scan. This is like the second best. And it's way better than what's being done in the on the scanners in the office. Okay.
Now, if we have one of those old scans,
Half the
we
time-
don't have the book, is there a way to convert that? Maybe that's what you covered.
It requires a lot of work. Basically, it's going to be. It was taking our students about. What did I figure out? Was it
8
like
to 10
8 to
hours.
10 hours? No, I'm sorry. They could do 8 to 10 pages an hour. Yeah, and
But that still exists, that
That's
process.
actually pretty
you can do it in Acrobat Pro. What you do is you scan, and unfortunately I can't show you because Acrobat Pro isn't showing up here, but you scan and then it does suspect words, and you tell it what that word is actually, and you go through by hand and do that for every single one. Now, one of the things we run into though is some of the scans are so bad that like that whole gutter side, it doesn't even recognize that that's text. And there's no way to fix that but going and getting the scan. So when we have some students working for Deb now who are scanning, and basically they go and they get another copy of the book and they go and do a good scan, and then they can do it. So the good scan is key.
Yeah, because the
Unfortunately.
text-to-speech software that the students use is really quirky. And so it will pick up shadow on a page. It will pick up if there's been underlined, like maybe it's a document that the professor originally uploaded and scribbled on it. So when this software then goes to read it, it will jump all around.
So we did a bunch for linguistics this year. Did the student have trouble with those?
No.
Or it worked. Okay.
That worked but you went through and rescanned.
Right. Oh, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we now have, I think there's, is it archaeology class?
So
There's two social classes, but there's an archaeology class, I think, that someone is, the grad student, I think, the grad PA is scanning those. And he's had pretty good luck with ones that he did in Carpenter. Even then, it's not perfect, but I told him that from what the students have told me, if it's a word here, a word there, that it's not picking up, then that's fine. It's just when it's like full passages of text or it's skipping around.
How do you know if it worked when you don't have the reader?
You can, well, one of the readers that we use is Natural Reader, and it is, I know it's on all the library computers. It's this computer, so you can actually download it for free. But that's what a lot of our students use because it's free. The other thing you can do though is, and maybe Acrobat Reader will have this as well. I know Acrobat Pro has a text-to-speech. Let's see if it's. I find it ironic that it's under the view.
Read out loud?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're using, yeah. Activate Read Out Loud. So this is also in Pro. So what we'll have students do is once they've done the OCR scanning part, is to do this and listen to a couple pages and see if it sounds decent. Right. Another thing you can do, because it basically makes this text, is Control A to select everything and then paste it into a Word doc and see if it pastes it in logical order. So when you take a scan and you're converting it in Adobe Acrobat, a lot of what you're doing is sort of cleaning up how it tags it. So for example, you might be saying this is a heading 1, this is a heading 2. You might be making each of these cells. If this were just a paragraph, you might be checking to make sure the words that it was confused by were actually correct. You would want to make sure that it's reading this, right? So you can put things in a certain order, that kind of stuff. And that's what the students that Deb has hired have been doing a lot in the background. Part of the reason they've had to do so much of that, I think, is because we've started with scans that the faculty have been using for years that are old and not scanned for this purpose, with this purpose in mind. Right? Yeah. And it's a bit tricky for faculty, I know, because it's not as tricky as people think, but one of the things that they think, oh, but if I put up the scan that's one to a page, that means more printing for the students, and that costs them more. You can actually, just so you guys all know, yes, you can print 2 to a page. Multiple, yeah. So 2 by 2. Let's see. You can do 1 by 2. You can do 1 by 2. You can do custom. So basically, you can set it up, and you can set it so that it's like landscape 2 by 2. So that's what I do. You can't really see very well with this document because it's blank.
Plus they don't pay for printing anymore.
You don't pay for printing anymore. True that. Save a tree. Save a tree.
I have another form question. So I use Wufoo forms for students to apply to 360s. How would that work? Does it work?
That's a good question. First thing I would do is Wufoo. So most vendors are very aware that we are expected to provide digital materials that are accessible, and so they are working to do this. It's easier with web forms and things like that. An issue with like JSTOR and some of the things that are repositories of older documents, right, is that they're going backward and trying to make all those things compatible, but they aren't necessarily. So we've looked at some of the things to make sure that they are. Oops, that's an accessibility feedback form. How funny.
Thank you.
Actually, I don't think it was Wufoo. I think it was somebody else's.
No, that was a Wufoo form.
Oh. Facts on form building integration. So I would want to do some research and see. And Juliana can also help with that kind of research. They're very aware of accessibility, and they try to make things accessible, but it's only with something like our templates, right? For example, it's only as good as how people use the templates. So if people don't use the heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, then things can get wonky.
Yeah.
So.
It's not an issue I've encountered yet, but
Yes, no, it's a good question. And I think we found for one of the students was taking a psych class and looked into Qualtrics and found that they had accessible stuff. But I'm not sure about Wufoo. I haven't checked it yet.
The Qualtrics stuff was not accessible with Braille.
That's right.
So we had to get a student to read everything.
No. You're thinking of Qualtrics is the survey software. The
Right.
thing that wasn't accessible was the
What's the
SPSS.
Oh, that-
There's
that's
apparently
what
no
it is.
statistical software package that is accessible.
Well, and technically, the way the laws are interpreted is that the college should not be contracting with any outside agency that does not use fully accessible stuff. So technically, we shouldn't even be working with Qualtrics.
No, not Qualtrics.
The
SPSS.
The SPSS, I'm sorry.
Using SPSS for the last 20 years or more.
Right. Well,
well, there's a way to do psychology with that.
well, I was saying, if there's no accessible alternative, then you're basically saying you don't do any statistical research until something becomes accessible. That's a bit.
The same with, some professors are using or going to ebooks because they're thinking that they're less expensive for students, but ebooks are not accessible largely to students with print disabilities and using some of the software.
Yeah.
They're not, because sometimes what happens, in order for students to use those textbooks, I have to go to the company and ask for a PDF of the book. Companies do not have to provide that, and many will not, especially if it's a smaller company. The bigger ones like Macmillan and Cengage, some of those they will, but you probably have to give them your first onboard child in order for it to happen because they don't make it easy. But you get the PDF, and then they use the student will then use their screen reading software in order to read it. But it's still, it's not, I forget exactly what point I was trying to make, I'm sorry. But it's just a tricky thing. The e-books, that's where I was going. The e-books do not often have an electronic file. So there's no place for a company to go to give us something. We have two students in a biology class this semester where the professor uses strictly an online book. I've been round and round with the publisher, I went round and round with the rep. There is no electronic file of that book. And so therefore I could not get an accessible text for our students. Technically, we shouldn't be using that company. But we do.
It probably exists as a series of web pages.
Yes, and because it's one of those ebooks that's constantly changing because they're constantly updating it to keep it current. So they have no electronic file for it. So our students don't have technically what they're entitled to. Tricky.
So one of the things we have discovered, see if I can find that.
Oh, that's the new stuff
Do you need just a title that's
Yes.
on reserve?
Yes. Do you know one?
Hey, political history.
Funny how that would just be on the top of your head.
No, I ordered them all, so.
Pain, political history. So to give you an example of so one of the things we ran into with this is a little different.
Project views, different books.
Gotcha.
They have used.
Gotcha. Sometimes this PDF, and let's see, will be accessible, and sometimes it won't. Depends on how it's been made. One of the ways that you can tell is, can you highlight the text? You can also do the text to read thing. Stuff on Project Views is shared pretty openly. One of the things that we ran into with eBrary.
That's not wrong. If you just go back to where you were for the best chats in February,
Actually, I know about
do you know one?
I happen to know of a document too. This was very frustrating because this book is available on eBrary. And I'll show you what you see before I log in because so this is what you see. This is actually text, but the way this is set up, it's not usable with Natural Reader, right? There's no way to the student would have to copy and paste essentially. And there is a way, now that I've signed in, I've gotten an accessible version. So you have to, and we have documentation about this that will go up at some point, but I emailed library@brynmawr.edu, who happens to be Olivia, who I was actually talking to. So, and she and I tested this out, but essentially, that's not right. So I set up a.
Nope, Jenny.
I set up a eBrary account, which is free. And then I emailed the library and asked them to email eBrary and tell them to give me an accessible account. So now, when I log on, if I've logged in, I see this text. And it's a little bit easier because I can copy and paste this into Natural Reader, but also Natural Reader has something where it'll give you like a little bar that hovers in the page, and so you can just say read this page, read that page, read this page. And there are some web browser plugins that are coming on board that will read a page, so you don't have to cut and paste it into something else. But we tried, for example, downloading this file. Download the file, and there it's a PDF with the text, like it's been OCR'd and everything like that. But for the digital rights management portion of it, you can't open it in anything but Adobe Digital Edition, right? So you can't open it in the file that could read it to you. And Adobe Digital Edition says, oh, we're accessible. We work with JAWS. We work with this. But they work with things that are for completely visually impaired people that read your entire screen. That's not the kind of readers and devices that our screens work with. So I think they're slowly getting that, and I've been reading that there's going to be some changes to Adobe Digital Editions. But so it's really frustrating because this document is actually ready to go. I mean, it would be screen readable if they would release it with the rights that would allow people to pull it into the screen reader. So sometimes Deb has run into that, where even if a file exists that a student could use, legally we can't get it, you know. So anyway. Okay. So sorry to end on that depressing note. The happy note is it's gotten a lot easier to do this than it was even back in August. And hopefully it will continue to do so. And as I said, there is this, because especially state schools have this mandate to provide materials, it's putting pressure on